Hello and welcome back to the Stronghold. I'm the Magi and you know what time it is, and we're gonna get our midweek magic on. This week's midweek magic initially felt a little contrary, but with a very recent announcement of a small window to quick draft this set, it's really much more approachable for an average free-to-play player than we had expected. So in this video we're going to be talking about the different ways that you can approach this and maybe even specific decks that you might want to build towards. But before we get into all that, allow me to do the awkward thing and promote the channel. A while back, one of my viewers was kind enough to point out that we are the only channel putting out timely midweek magic content. So be sure to subscribe right here at the Planeswalker Stronghold for all of your future midweek magic needs, because we will be bringing you a deck list or strategy every single week. So what do you say we put all this aside and just get to that? Alright, so the first thing to keep in mind when you're trying to put together a cons themed deck is that you might have quite a few non-cons cards that are actually legal in this. When I kind of just glanced through the lower rarity cards, I found 96, if you're running the 4-ofs, reprint cards, and of course about half of that is actually the gain lands. So fixing really shouldn't be too much of an issue in this, because you've got 12 dual lands for sure that's going to fit in any build that you really do here. A lot of these have been fairly recent reprints, like Monastery Swiftspear, Disdainful Stroke, and Cancel, that I believe are all currently in Standard. Then you've got some white cards like Defiant Strike and Feast of Resistance or Ride Down, multiple additional red cards like Shatter, Tormenting Voice, Act of Treason, Trumpet Blast, Hordling Outburst, and then green kind of brings up the rear with Highland Game, Naturalize, and Incremental Growth. So if you're a longtime player on Arena like me, you can probably field a deck without having drafted or opened a single pack of Cons of Tarkir. It won't be very good, but it can be done. And if you are 2 years plus on Arena, I'd say you're going to have a lot of these cards, even as just 1 or 2 ofs, to help you fill in those gaps. Alright, so what you're looking at is my newest free-to-play account, and in a recent discussion I theorized that with a single draft and opening your free packs, you should be able to put together a reasonable deck for the midweek magic that we've got going on this week. So let's find out if that's true here. So the answer is yes, but just barely. My draft was Temur. It went pretty well as far as getting actual Temur cards. And as you can see, we were able to put together a reasonable deck for Temur here. This account also did not really gain from any of the reprints. I think I had a Cancel, 3 Disdainful Strokes, and some of the other cards like Act of Treason, Trumpeting Blast, I actually have from, not reprints, but from just playing this set. And I also had a Ride Down, but none of those cards made the cut into this deck or contributed in any way. So it is, in fact, possible. Is this the deck I end up playing? I don't know. Alright, so the first deck I want to talk about is Temur, because in my play experience in drafting this format, this was the best combination of accessible, draftable, and as well as being a successful archetype to play. I think I had my biggest wins all off of Temur. And it's a little quirky. It goes a little off book, so to speak. This first column here is all cards you probably want to consider, but aren't really part of the Temur archetype. They just play well as creatures. Monastery Swiftspear, Jeskai Elder, both prowess creatures. Longshot Squad with the Outlast ability can just really gum up the board and very quickly becomes a 4/4. And Hooting Mandrills is another card that, even though it's Delve and it's meant for another archetype, playing one or two of these in your deck can really punish early removal by dropping a 4/4 Trampler much earlier than they're expecting it. From there, we've got an entire column of Simic, just vanilla creatures. The Sambar, the Highland Game, Alpine Grizzly is probably the best of all of these. Scaldkin is probably runner-up for the best of the kind of vanilla creatures. It also gives you a bit of late-game reach with a shock ability. And a Scion of the Glaciers is just really difficult to deal with on the board. If you've got one or two of these, I would consider running it. And by changing its configuration and moving it up to a 4-power creature, you can trigger some ferocious things kind of on demand. Force Away, of course, is a great combat trick to start the conversation. Savage Punch is literally the definition of removal for this deck. Arc Lightning, another good one. Barrage of Boulders is not quite as good, but when you've got a bunch of creatures, not only does this maybe sweep away some chump blockers, some X1s, but by making it so they can't block, you can just swing in with a huge bunch of creatures here and really finish out the game. Awaken the Bear similarly gives you a +3/+3 and trample to really mess with those combat situations. Winter Flame is another great one here because it can allow you to tap a creature and or deal 2 damage to a target creature to either win a combat or potentially take out a creature after combat that is sitting on 2. Temur Charm is just the signature versatile spell for this, and probably one of the better charms, I think. +1/+1 in a fight, a counter, or creatures with power 3 or less can't block this turn. Again, just turning off that chump block aspect. Bring Low is your remove a morph creature of choice. Pretty decent stuff there. Swift Kick is a little bit weaker, honestly, because a lot of times it costs you a creature, but it fits much more nicely in Temur, because you do have some bigger creatures that can survive that fight spell. And of course, Burn Away is the top end removal, dealing 6 damage to a creature. It also lets you do some graveyard things if and when that's applicable. Heir of the Wilds is kind of our signature Temur creatures. That's right, we're just now starting to talk about Temur creatures. Heir of the Wilds, a 2/2 for 2 with Death Touch and a ferocious upside, is pretty solid in this deck. Bear's Companion, it is uncommon, but it's just a powerhouse. I would run as many of these as you have, honestly. A 2/2 and a 4/4 for 5 mana, that's overrate. And 2 bodies just puts that much more tax on your opponent's removal. And from there, of course, we've got morph creatures, a 3/1 flyer in Mistweaver, Pinewalker, a 5/5, and an untapped trigger. The tracker is a 3/3 first strike, which is enough to deal with other morphers. Your Snowhorn Rider is the signature morph in this, and a 5/5 Trampler just cannot be undersold for this deck. It's pretty ridiculous. Woolly Loxodon, a 6/7, just really good. Maybe one of the best monocolor morphers as far as just sheer power and board presence. It's really absurd. You flip this and you might accidentally win the game on just an unblocked morph. From there, of course, we've got some basics, and it's pretty evenly spread. Obviously, with this build, we're a little bit more green. But make sure you're adjusting these according to what is going on with your individual choices, because this is not an ideal, fully fleshed out, well-balanced deck. This is meant to be a starting point for you to think about the cards that you have in your collection from your packs that you open, from your draft experience, etc., etc. Don't just download this deck and craft it. You'll be very disappointed with what you get. We do have a couple of the enemy lands in here. I think 2 of each is probably the right number. And then, of course, the tri-land for the appropriate color combination is almost always a good choice. You might actually even want to throw in some of the other tri-lands if you're splashing a 4th color or something like that. And certainly don't be afraid to run more than one. This is one of those areas where I've put it in here just as a placeholder, but I would seriously consider running 4 of these and then maybe trimming back on the other tap lands. Alright, so just like the Temur build that we just looked at, this is in no way an ideal version of the deck. This is not something that you should just blindly craft. It's a primer list that's meant to get you thinking about the cards that you have in your individual collection and building towards that Abzan theme. The first column here is all about the Outlast mechanic in and of itself. Pretty simple, straightforward stuff there. The second column here is cards that care or provide +1/+1 counters, but don't directly have the Outlast mechanic. Beyond that, we've got a whole column of removal because, you know, any deck is going to need removal. And a note, previously when I showed the reprints, I forgot Killshot was in Streets of New Capenna, so that's definitely something that should be on your radar there. But a lot of good removal, mostly due to black cards here, obviously. And then the 4th column here is something that I'm referring to as the Warrior sublist. And really, this can make a deck in and of itself. And it's one of the reasons that this particular tribe is so hard to draft within Khans of Tarkir. It's just remarkably powerful, a lot of which has to do with Abzan Guide being a 4/4 lifelink morpher and also a warrior. But you've got the 2 chiefs in here. You've got the Horde Chief to give you some card advantage. And Heir of the Wilds doesn't directly fit in quite as well as the others because of the ferocious sub-mechanic, but certainly that can happen with an Outlast deck. And its Death Touch 2/2 for 2 can't really be ignored with or without that Warrior subclass. So definitely something to think about there. And then the last card here, of course, Woolly Loxodon doesn't really fit any theme of the deck, but as a 6/7 morphable creature, it really can't be ignored as a powerful common in the set. Beyond that, we're running some basics, 2 of each of the enemy gain lands, and then 1 of the Sandstep Citadel. Again, these aren't set in stone numbers. They're not ideals or targets, but just shows you what's possible in there. And once again, I generally prefer the enemy lands than the ally gain land pairs. And hey, just in case you didn't catch all that, Matt would like you to know that the deck list that we discussed in this video is going to have a link down in the doobly-doo to take you over to EtherHub, along with a link to any other alternative lists that you might wish to consider. He only asks that you give it a little thumbs up when you're over there checking out the deck list. And I plan on live playing this event on Wednesday at 11 a.m. over on my Twitch channel, so definitely stop in and check it out. Because the Stronghold is so much more than just a YouTube channel, and you can find links to all of our other social media outlets in our profile. Because at the end of the day, we're all budget players.
And as a community, we're stronger together. So like, comment, subscribe, follow, do all those things to show a little love. It's appreciated more than you know.